Earlier this week, the trailer for Devil Summoner, Raidou Remastered, The Mystery of the Soulless Army was released, confirming it for a summer release, meaning that this is Atlus's major release for the year, at least before the Persona 30th begins. While this game had been leaked late last year, I personally didn't think that it would be a remake, at least not one to the scale that we are seeing with this trailer, and instead I thought it would just be an upscaled HD release like Nocturne. I have previously covered why I thought this was the case since I began speculating on the timeline for Atlus in 2025, but to summarize, it basically felt like Raidou just wasn't a high priority. Raidou Kuzunoha has never really felt like a fan-favorite duology. Most seem to know Raidou more from his cameos in other more popular entries like Nocturne and Soul Hackers, and if anything, most seem to agree that the Soulless Army is mediocre in both gameplay and story. The only thing that had really been in favor for a Reload-style remake would be the fact that Raidou 1 was the highest-ranking non-Persona game on Atlus's poll of potential games to be remade. And for me personally, that just wasn't enough to convince me that Raidou was a high priority, especially given the failure of Soul Hackers 2, which had at first seemed like the death sentence to the Devil Summoner brand. Fans weren't specifically hostile, and while there were people who genuinely liked what Soul Hackers was, most, myself included, either felt that it wasn't a good successor to Devil Summoner, or else didn't seem to have a strong opinion about it one way or the other. It just sort of released and then just kind of faded out of most people's minds. And this failure was soon followed by the registered domain names of multiple numbered SMT games, which I took to mean that Team Maniacs would be focusing on them for the immediate future, and that the next game from this subdivision would be Shin Megami Tensei 6. I was so sure that it even ended up being the basis for a video earlier this year. However, I was bluntly wrong, and am now ready to take all of the "you told me so's" that anyone wants to toss at me in the comments section. And to make matters worse for me personally, this reveal actually comes as I am working on a video specifically about the original Raidou Kuzunoha versus the Soulless Army, with me recording my own footage on a hard mode playthrough, and am at the time of writing on the final boss, and have already begun recording and editing what promises to be a very lengthy video. Raidou Remastered now makes that video feel obsolete before it's even completed, which I fear will hamper the release of both it and the similar video that I have also begun scripting for its sequel, Raidou Kuzunoha vs King Abaddon, in the algorithm. This anxiety, when paired with the fact that I've suffered a lot of technical difficulties while recording this one game, makes me feel a bit down that Raidou Remastered was announced now. However, independently of that, I am actually quite excited for this remake as Raidou 1 had a solid foundation with poor execution. The story and the pacing were quite rough, the combat was basic, the presentation off, and the exploration off-putting. This remake has the opportunity to fix all of these things and truly allow the game to live up to its potential in a similar manner that the canon of Vengeance does for SMT5. While details for any changes on the story side are as of yet unknown, it is confirmed that the far superior King Abaddon combat style is replacing the bare-bones Soulless Army one, and the trailer emphasizes the visuals in a way that showcases where the game is preserving the original's charm and appeal, but also updating it so that the setting can feel far less, shall we say, dated. I particularly love that the new models retain that Kaneko-style Kim Possible lip, which I was initially worried would have been replaced, but instead has been preserved, at least in the models. I do feel that these new visuals look a bit too shiny and crisp versus the more toned down ones in the original, but right now I am not sure which will ultimately be better for the game, all things considered, as the trailer didn't emphasize or really show any of the areas where Raidou's original style really helped with the tone. So I am optimistic at the darker direction for those scenes to contrast the mundanity of the capital otherwise. Beyond that, the only thing that I am personally worried about is the voice acting, as this had been a creative decision of the original to invoke a silent movie-like aesthetic that I hope is preserved as an option like in Nocturne. I also didn't really like the English voices that I heard in the trailer. The delivery of Kaya's desperation felt far too flat, and Narumi didn't exhibit any swagger, while Raidou and Goto's didn't have any highs or lows to give a solid perspective on. Quite frankly, even without that option, I'm pretty confident that a mod will be available after a short period of time anyway, and even without that, the Mystery of the Soulless Army would be the definitive way to experience the story by default. and this also leads to the question of whether or not Devil Summoner, or at least Raidou Kuzunoha, is making a return. In the Atlas Tube World Spotlight video, director Yamai Kazuyuki-san stated that he had previously wanted to see Raidou return for a while, possibly even leading to a new Raidou adventure down the road. Something that, according to a comment on a previous video, is a sentiment that had previously been shared by an executive at around the turn of the decade. Personally, I would have preferred the Raidou combat system in a Soul Hackers-like setting, a dystopian futuristic cyberpunk akin to the series' origins, but without the baggage of Soul Hackers 2 VTuber-esque aesthetic and lack of commitment to established lore and ideas. That as a concept would have felt especially poignant given that Yamai-san in the interview also mentioned still feeling uncertain about the future, much like when Raidou was first developed and released 19 years ago. But whether or not that is the direction of Devil Summoner after Raidou Remastered now feels ferociously unlikely. Devil Summoner is a very unique series with an ever-shifting identity, ranging from cyberpunk dystopian to alternate history to Persona Light, and I'm not so sure that that will change with whatever happens next. However, what is most likely to happen next, precluding SMT6 anyhow, would be Raidou Remastered King Abaddon, a game that I feel would be a lot trickier to get right with a remaster, since unlike the Soulless Army, the story and gameplay are already fantastic, and look no further than Reload to see the disparity that fans can feel for a remaster, if it feels like the developers are trying to appropriate the vision of their predecessors with superficial changes for the sake of feeling modern or more up to the standard of brand identity. Something that I feel the Mystery of the Soulless Army is guilty of, given that it emits a more vibrant color scheme versus the grounded color palette of the original, and is including voice acting. But don't get it twisted. This is very clearly a remake done in passion. The Soulless Army was not exactly a success, commercially or critically. While Atlas tried very hard, ultimately the series wasn't the hit they tried to push it as becoming. And the consensus was and remains for the first game specifically that it is fine at best and forgettable at worst. There really isn't a cynical reason to assume the worst like there is with Persona 4 Rerun, so I want to assume the best. But whether or not this game lives up to the expectations that I and many others are setting as a more worthy precursor to King Abaddon remains to be seen. If you like this topic, then leave a comment down in the comment section below. I am very good at responding to the few comments that I get, and would also appreciate a like if you enjoyed this video, and to also view some of my other videos on screen now. At present, I am working in overdrive to try and get my video for Raidou's 1 and 2 out before the hype for this title kind of dies down. So subscribe if those interest you as well. Until next time, have a great week everybody, and I do hope that you will be so inclined to watch my next video when it gets released next week.